So, what does an early stage medical technology company need to succeed? Number one, you have to answer a few very specific questions, which I think a lot of the panelists already touched upon, but what value will your product provide? So when we talk about value, it doesn't just have to be, I'm solving a totally unmet need. It could be, I'm just going to be more efficient. I can get the doctor out 15 minutes earlier, and they'll pay for that. Or I can reduce infection. I can do something that I add value. So you've got something you're going to add value. Then you have to ask yourself, who will pay for this, and why will they pay for it? And finally, again, for medical devices, what evidence is going to be required so I can get regulatory approval? And once I've got regulatory approval, I still need to get market acceptance. Those are all things that are very specific to the medical device startup. Now, a lot of things we talked about for medical devices startups are the same needs that other startup companies have. They need money. I'm sure if we went to another conference and they said, okay, how do we do startups in the food industry or the software industry, what have you not, they'd have the same issues about venture capitalists and we've got to get together and we've got to do this and that. So there's a lot of things that are similar, but then there are things that are very specific to medical device startups. And these are requirements that medical devices need to be successful above and beyond what other companies would need. What are they? A regulatory strategy, being aware of FDA, Health Canada, knowing how these things are always changing. So this is a huge extra burden that a medical device startup has to take into account right at the beginning compared to someone developing a new chair, for example. Reimbursement, something that didn't really seem to be a problem until recently, as we heard about all the costs escalating in the field of in the healthcare field. Governments and everybody's looking for a way to cut back, to hold back. So now they've got all these additional hurdles just for you to get paid. And we've heard a bit of talk about health technology assessments. A third point, and this point is not strictly relevant to medical devices, but it is very particularly and acute to medical devices, is that IP is used a lot in our industry. Why? It's, as was mentioned by a few speakers, it's both used as a sword so that people can go up and hit other competitors with and also hit you with. So you need it as a sword and as a shield. So many times you want to get hold of IP just so you can have the freedom to operate, or you can block someone else's freedom to operate. Medical device startups also need in place very rigorous quality systems because as demanded by the regulators in different countries, they're going to demand a strong implanted quality system, ISO 1345 and whatnot, or QSRs. And all those aspects, combined with the other issues like funding, finding people and that, they all have to work together. They're all interrelated. What Kris put together for you is a quick study on how we brought one product to market called the Sinergy system, and this is for the treatment of sacroiliac joint pain. Sacroiliac joint pain, if you see those two red lines between the sacrum and the coccyx, those don't move on a human being. They're fused. If they're not fused, you can walk like a monkey. What happens is that there was an unmet need in this area. When I say unmet need, I should point out that not every physician we spoke to thought there was an unmet need. A lot of them said, no, I've never seen that. I've never heard of pain from the sacroiliac joint specifically. When we talk about back pain, people think about the vertebrae, the discs, sometimes the facet joints. The sacrum is further down. And a lot of doctors said, well, I've never seen in my 30 years of practice sacroiliac joint pain. But what you do tend to see when there's an unmet need is patients complaining, patients bouncing around in the system that are not satisfied. You see doctors taking something that was designed to do A and trying to jimmy it and trying to do B. You see a lot of things happening, which tells you if you look through the clouds, there is an unmet need there. And we perceive this to be an unmet need. The first thing we did was work with anatomical specialists. By the way, that's Kris Shah, second from the left. So he had himself in his talk. We worked with anatomical specialists to identify what was the cause of sacroiliac joint pain. One of the big causes is women who, it's a predominantly a problem that women have after they've gone through childbirth. Because that joint, which is not supposed to move, will dilate to allow the baby to come through. And then sometimes when the joint's supposed to reset, it won't set correctly. And nerves will get pinched. So we worked with anatomists to study cadavers to see where were those nerves that were causing the pain. And those are those red lines you see innervating the joint. With that information, we set out to develop a tool. Keeping in mind now we're going after an unmet need, and we've done our homework to understand what we're targeting in the nerves. Our first design failed completely. It didn't get to the area, it didn't treat it, it was useless. The second design failed because we weren't able to predict the outcome, and this is due to the nature of the sacroiliac joint pain because you've got muscle, tendons, fat, bone. There's a lot of different human tissues in that joint, in and around that joint, and we were trying to deliver energy in a controlled fashion to destroy those nerves, essentially to take away the pain. I put that up there to show that strike one, strike two, and then on our third hit, we got something. But we would have kept going because we knew that we could find a solution, and if we had a solution, we believed that we would be meeting an unmet need. What we came up with was a monopolar cooled RF lesioning tool where we would burn a series of lesions along the joint to stop the innervation coming out of those foramens. So those little holes there you see in the coccyx would come out and innervate the joint. So we were putting in place a line of block, a line of fire, so that the joint was no longer innervated. As I mentioned here, we didn't just develop the tool then, we also developed the procedure. And clearly we cannot do this ourselves because we are engineers, so we had to work in conjunction with a few key physicians that believed in this approach and were ready to work with us both on the cadavers, on the animal studies, and ultimately on human beings. And we developed a radio frequency generator, a specialized probe, a cooling system, and also, most importantly, with the physicians, we developed the procedure itself. So we didn't just come and say, here's our tool, go to work. As touched on again, intellectual property is critical. So we went about submitting patents, I should say, not just for the platform, the technology, but also what you can do in the United States is method patents. And these are very powerful in the United States. They don't exist outside, but given that the United States represents almost 50% of the world market, it's something very important to look at. We then went after regulatory clearance, USA, Health Canada, Europe, etc. Now manufacturing. We have a plant in Mississauga, but we don't try and manufacture everything, and certainly not when you're starting off, because you don't know what's going to work or not, and you don't know how big the market's going to be, so we don't want to overinvest in all kinds of machinery until we see that this thing is going to work. So we try and farm out as much as possible, but keeping in the back of our mind, as the business grows, we're going to bring in-house technology. And that's not the norm now. A lot of people say you should just keep farming out everything forever. We don't believe in that. We think that you should bring it in-house, but at the right time. Why do you bring it in-house? Obviously for cost reasons, but also for flexibility reasons, because medical devices are continually being innovated and improved. It's not like a drug that once you get it out in the market, it's going to be good for 15, 20 years. A medical device, you've got it out today, And a lot of companies will tell you, even the biggest companies, they're proud of the fact that more than 50% of their sales come from products that are in less than 3 years old. They're not brand new products, but there might be a pacemaker that they've brought out a newer version. They're constantly being evolved. So that's why you want to have in-house assembly, in-house manufacturing ultimately if the product is stable, because then you can make those innovations very rapidly. Reimbursement. As I mentioned, the governments are looking for a way to stop paying more. And this is just another roadblock. However, if you don't overcome this roadblock, no matter what technology you have, if you don't get paid for it, you're not going to be in business very long. So you have to go through a health technology assessment. We put together payer education packages, which we try and go and explain to the payer, this is why you should buy it. This is the savings you're going to have. Then we also offer reimbursement support, because a lot of physicians, specifically physicians if they're not in a hospital but if they're in a private clinic as they are in the United States, they'll say, look, I can't take the risk of buying this tool, using it up for this procedure on this patient if their insurance doesn't cover it. So we would have people provide reimbursement support, go and meet the insurers, help the physician make the argument why the insurer should pay for this procedure. Clinical trials. Now, we're talking here about clinical trials post-regulatory approval. There are also times when the government will demand that you do regulatory clinical trials prior to regulatory approvals. In this specific case, we did a number of clinical trials post-approval. Why? To help us build those arguments when we go and see the payers that we have the medical evidence that they should pay for this. Because what are they going to say? What they always say is, they'll never say this doesn't work. They'll just say, well, there's not enough evidence, this looks investigational, we can't pay for it. They won't take the risk of saying this doesn't work. They don't need to. What the insurance will do is say it's investigational. So we start off with simple studies, a safety study, a limited clinical trial study, prospective. Then we move into the heavyweight studies, the costly ones, randomized controlled trials. And we have one done at Johns Hopkins. We have another one about to be completed. Enrollment is done. We're just waiting for the 6 months follow-up, and then that'll be published as well. And as those things come out, we start to build heavy, weighty evidence that it becomes more and more difficult for a payer, an insurance company, to say, well, this sounds like investigational. We go, well, no, here's the series of trials published in peer-reviewed journals that demonstrate the value of the technology. This is critical. Then we start to do sales and marketing. In this particular area, again, something unique to the medical device industry is that you need to have societies, medical societies on board. Whereas if you come out with a better cell phone, you don't really need to go to the Cell Phone Society of Canada to try and convince them that you've got a great cell phone. But you do need to do that for medical devices, because there are key opinion leaders that are, as one of the slides pointed out, maybe 2.5% to 5%. And a lot of the other physicians are going to be looking to those people to lecture, to explain to them, and then to follow them. And those key opinion leaders generally are part of societies. They're the executives of those societies. And if those societies endorse your procedure, then the followers will say, okay, I feel secure in picking up this technology and using it. So in summary, when we look at bringing out a medical device, you should think of it as a whole process, not just a product. And it's a process that starts off with some form of unmet need, doing research, fundamental research to know what you want to, how you want to go about designing, developing the product, developing it, getting it approved, but also before you get it approved, going through your IP very early so that you protect your ideas, getting it regulatory cleared, manufactured, your trials, your sales, and then being ready to do that whole process again and not sitting on your laurels, because you have to be constantly evolving it. So starting a medical device company requires a deep consideration of a number of these complex issues which are all interrelated. And if you're going to be successful, all those have to work in concert and function together. Thank you.